I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so first item of business is, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 4.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. At this time, we're actually going to move audience comments up above the budget hearing. So if you are here from the public wishing to offer anything.
I have a question and comment about the garbage and the cars and everything that are getting dropped off and left up by Judy Reservoir up on Old Day Creek Road. It's a little pull out where everybody can see Mount Baker and all that stuff. And there's a lot of people living there at night and leaving their garbage there. And just last night, somebody dumped off a bunch more garbage, couches and some other stuff. I just saw on the way to work this morning. I pass by there every day, going to work and coming home. And the other thing is the geese, they're starting to move back in. Would it be upset the PUD if someone got a propane cannon and woke them up once or twice a day, try and encourage them to leave? Or PUD could get their own thing and do something, because it's cheaper to not have them poop there than it is to clean up their water, But it's just that on that pull out, if they put some fencing up, if they're allowed to, it would keep people from dumping garbage in cars, because it happens all the time, and you guys know that. It's just before anything can spill into the water.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay. And what was your name, just for the record?
Craig Cole.
Craig Cole?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for your input.
All right, thank you.
All right, so at this time, we will move into the budget hearing. And so this will be the public hearing for the 2023 budget. And we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And it is open for public input on this topic. And commissioners are free to ask any questions at this time too. We do have quite a few other opportunities for questions. So think of anything and we'll jot it down and ask it tonight or at a later date. Brian,
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody to the public hearing on the 2023 proposed budget. I'd like to point out that all of the presentation material as well as the budget is available online on our website. And also, as Commissioner Lindquist pointed out, that if you have questions during or after, I'm happy to answer or take those questions, and I'll have my phone number and email address at the end of the presentation. So with that, I just start the four main purposes of the budget. We begin in midsummer with the departments that submit their requests and project updates. I compile all the information, and then as the management team, we get together, review those updates, prioritize projects and requests, make sure that they align with the district's goals and the strategic plan. I update the revenue forecast using the September numbers, which I'll get into in just a minute. And then we modify the financing plan as necessary for timing of projects, delays, projects that have moved up or back, and also for any debt service that needs to be added to fund those projects. We make our final recommendation to the board as the proposed budget, which we're doing tonight. And then the board, as we mentioned earlier, will have many opportunities and during the work sessions to ask questions, take public comment, and then we can modify the budget. The adopted budget will be effective January 1st of 2023, and it establishes the priorities and spending authority for the coming year. And then during next year, I do the monthly reports to the board with the quarterly updates at each of the meetings. So the strategic objectives remain the same for the prior 3 years. We're going to continue to expand programs that preserve the life and infrastructure of our assets. We're doing scheduled inspections for valves, pumps, hydrants throughout the water system. We're also investing strategically in priority replacement projects that have been identified in the CIP. We're also doing some analysis now that will, instead of just replacing one for one, engineering is looking at strategic replacements. So if there might be 2 or 3 reservoirs that are coming up on replacement, combining those into one reservoir replacement if it makes sense and is more efficient. Over the long term, that should make our water system easier to operate and lower cost. Fidalgo is another good example of that. We're trading assets and using Anacortes assets where we would have to replace some of our old and worn out assets. They can operate their existing assets and take over those water services. The last part is conservation of resources. By conserving resources, this allows us to maximize our existing capacity and delay expansion projects for as long as possible. We're investing in new meters, leak detection equipment to identify water loss, consulting with our larger consumers, inspecting their systems, making recommendations and improvements, and we're continuing to offer rain barrels, shower heads, low flow shower heads, and information to the customers and the public to help conserve water too. Moving on to the year-to-date numbers in September, just like to point out on this graph, the 2 bar graphs are last year's in blue and this year's budget. And for the first 4 or 5 months, we tracked really well to the budget. In June, you'll notice that June and July were actually trending a little bit below last year and the budget this year. August was a good month for consumption and use. We spiked up, and now in September, we're also seeing a little bit of a decrease compared to our budget in last year. Some of this I know is due to our billing cycles, and in September, we're 1 billing cycle short. So I'm assuming that some of this will catch up in the coming months, but between now and the end of the year. But I took that numbers and I forecasted out the $21.4 million that we've received so far. Trending that out to the end of the year, it's about $28.6 million. If you see, compare that to the budget, would be just under by about $155,000. Most of that is in commercial this year, which is a little bit interesting. Government, commercial, and agricultural is actually trending above that. So we'll see. I think we'll end up pretty close to at budget by the end of the year. Then for the budget, we take all of the funding sources, which is $61.6 million for next year. You can see water sales make up 50% of that. We also have a state loan, a drinking revolving loan from the state of Washington for $14 million. That will be used to finish up the Judy to Mount Vernon transmission line project. We also anticipating spending almost $14 million of reserves. That's 22% of the budgeted resources next year, and also use about $1.5 million of system development fees for capacity and growth type projects. The offset to all the budget uses are the funding sources are the budget uses. Most of our budget next year of the 61 million, 30 million of it is going to be spent on 3 major capital projects. That is the finishing up the transmission line project, starting construction on our campus building, and then also water treatment plant. They're going to do pump and replacement of the water treatment plant. Operating expenses will be about $17 million. And then we have debt service of 4.7 million, and several pipe replacement projects ranging from 300,000 to $2 million, ranging from culverts and fish ladders to just pipe replacements in the cities. The operation and maintenance budget is $17 million. If we start up at the water supply, which is the Judy system reservoir intakes, we use water from the Skagit River and 4 tributary streams. We'll spend just under $1 million. That's about 5% of the operational budget. Water treatment, at the water treatment plant, the major expenses are for chemicals as well as electricity for pumping. That's about $2.7 million in next year's operating budget. The transmission and distribution of the water from the reservoir out to all the customers is about $2.4 million, or 14%. Customer service includes the meter department. These are all the staff that work on and respond to the 26,000 accounts. So far this year, we've had over 8,000 service orders. And so they spend time responding to our customers and helping customers pay their bill and answer questions. And then all other administration expenses that can't be attributed to one of those 4 is about 52% of our budget, or $8.8 million. And that includes HR, IT, finance, and all the administration functions of the district. Our capital improvement plan spans 10 years and is a rolling 10-year financing plan. I've included the prior years just to show the difference. Up till 2020, we were averaging between $10 and $12 million of capital projects. COVID hit in 2020. That was the first year of the capital plan and the financing plan, and we anticipated spending about $20 million, but with COVID, we spent about $16 million. But you see in 2021, the transmission line got going. We ended up just over $20 million, and 11 million of it was attributed to the transmission line. So that's a big project that got going in 2021. We're going to continue that in 2022. We should do almost $29 million of capital improvements this year, by far our largest capital improvement plan, until 2023, which we are actually planning on doing $38 million of capital improvements. And that's consolidated into 3 main projects, which I'll show you in just a minute. But the new capital improvement plan spans from 2023 to 2032, and we have $131 million of projects. So most of that you can see is in the first 2, 2023 and 2024. And then we should go back down between $10 and $15 million of projects out for the 7 years of the capital improvement plan. The capital projects, as I mentioned, $38 million next year. We have 3 facility projects. Most of that is the campus building for about $16 million. The transmission line should be done, and that'll be about $10 million next year. Pipe replacement projects, there's various projects that make up that $7.5 million. And then operation and maintenance projects. The largest one is at the water treatment plant, as I mentioned earlier, and it's the backwash and pump replacement. There's also SCADA replacement projects, and then department projects. This is for smaller department projects that consists of vehicles, equipment, some maintenance projects and facilities, software, meter replacements, all show up under the department projects. After we put all those numbers together in the budget, we balance resources and uses. We validate the financial policy metrics that were also adopted. There's 4 main metrics that we use. The first one is the liquidity target. This just takes the estimated ending balance of the 2023 at the end of next year, all of the reserves. I forecast that out. It's about $14.6 million. Our target is 180 days of operating expenses. And so you divide half of the year in operating expenses, that's $8.7 million. And you can see that we exceed the target by just under $6 million. The revenue fund balance metric is similar to that, except we're only using the revenue fund. That's the main fund where all of the water revenue comes into for the district. The ending forecasted budget is $9.3 million. Our target is to have 2.5 months of operating expenses plus 2.5 months of depreciation. Combined, those are about $5.7 million. So we'll be above that by about $3.6 million at the end of next year. And the last two policy metrics, debt service coverage. This takes net operating revenue, which is just total revenue less operating expenses. That is estimated to be about $15.7 million. Our debt service for next year is $4.7 million. So that goes into the operating revenue. We can pay it 3.3 times. So the minimum target is 2 in that case, and we exceed that one also. And then the last one is just another way of estimating if we're replacing our assets as fast as their depreciation. So depreciation from this year will be used. It's about $9.1 million. And then the capital expenditures where we're paying for it out of sales, not using debt, not using any loans or bonds, is $24 million next year. So we're exceeding that target also by over $14 million. So those are all good metrics. I'll stop right there for a second, take a drink of water. Are there any questions on the metrics or what we've covered so far?
Me.
Okay. I will continue then and give a quick recap of the rate study that was conducted back in 2019. The district actually hired in 2018 and 2019 Financial Consulting Services Group, which is a consulting outfit that comes in and does a lot of rates studies throughout the state. The 4 main portions of that were up on the screen: cost of service, rate design, and then the revenue requirements. And so I started at the end of the rate study and was here for the final implementation of that. But the first part of it was cost of service, what happened in 2018. And FCS Group comes in and they look at all of the district expenses based on the different functions of the district and then also by customer type. And the goal is to distribute the cost equitably between customers based on how much it costs to provide that service and then how much revenue we get for providing that service. Hopefully it's about 100%. They use a lot of analysis and then also forecasting to distribute those costs between residential, commercial, and agricultural. And then they compare the revenue that was generated. There was one small recommendation that shifted some of the cost burden from residential to commercial, and that has been implemented into our rate design and cost. The second part was taking all of that information and discussing with the board and staff the various types of rate design considerations and the impact of each one. So one of those is fixed rate versus variable rate charges. So every month we have a fixed rate for the meter charge, $34.71, plus a variable rate charge based on how much water you consume. And by changing those, it changes not only where the burden is divvied up by the customer, but it also impacts how our revenue comes in for our cash flow. So those are important considerations for the rate design. Also, we looked at sustainability over time. Is there enough revenue being generated to pay for our operations and the capital improvement programs and projects that had been identified? The important consideration is that if we change any of these assumptions, it's a zero-sum game. And so if one customer benefits, another customers or the other customers, the rest of the customers are going to have to pay to make up that difference. So all of that went into a lot of discussions with the board at the time and staff to evaluate the fairness of the rates and the affordability and stability of those rates over time, and then the trade-offs. And at the end of that, there were a number of recommendations that were adopted. We eliminated the $2 capital surcharge that was used for capital projects that was on every meter. That was absorbed into the fixed rate charges per month and also prorated so that larger meter sizes, larger consumers would pay more of that $2 than the residential or a smaller meter type. That was an equity change. We also created the agricultural rate to support the agricultural industry of Skagit County at that time, which was a new rate. And then we also are promoting conservation by gradually phasing in higher rates for the highest, largest consumers in the third tier. So before, the more water you use, the actual price of the water went down. And now we're switching that so that the largest consumers, the more you use, the higher rates, it will gradually catch up and be at a higher rate. And that's just to incentivize large consumers to hopefully make investments to reduce water use and also conservation. The last part of their rate study and analysis was to forecast out all of the revenue requirements at the time for the next 20 years. And you can see there's a lot of information on here, but they take this big bottom graph, that's our operating expenses. And then they added in all of our existing debt, the red, and then they layered in new debt based on what the capital improvement plans would be, and also how much it would cost, how much money we could borrow to pay for those. And then we also made an assumption for that routine or our department capital projects. And so what they came up with was this flat black line, which is our revenue at the time. And then they decided that if we needed to do more projects or less projects, they started doing rate increase analysis to determine how much would be needed to pay for that increase in the capital improvement plan and also pay for all of the existing things that we have on the ongoing basis. And so if Joe was here at the time, we implemented a 5-year 5% increase for 5-year resolution, which can be modified. We don't have to adopt it, but right now that's what's the proposed budget is based on. We're going into 2023, which would be the 4th year of this initial financing plan. So the next part of the diagrams I'll show you is tracking how we've done for this past 3 years compared to the forecast. And I picked out the top lines are the revenue. So this was what their original plan forecasted as revenue. And the red is what we've done since 2019. And you can see in 2020, due to COVID, we did come in a little bit below on revenues. We popped back up in 2021. And then when I showed you earlier, we're trending a little bit behind right now. But again, I think some of that is billing and we should make it up by the end of the year. So we're doing all right on the top line or the revenue forecast. The middle two are the O&M budgets, estimates all the way out to 2024 and then the actual, and we're actually tracking almost spot on for the forecast versus the actual amount of operating and maintenance budgets. And one of the main reasons for that is on the debt side. Their original forecast anticipated borrowing more money earlier at higher interest rates using bonds instead of loans. And then because of COVID, we are a little bit delayed. But we've also been very successful on getting state loans, which have been ranging from 0.25% to 1.75%. So we are under on both the amount of money that we've had to borrow and the rate that we're paying, which is a very good thing. And so you can see that we've actually saved quite a bit of money just over the 3 years from the debt service, and that'll continue on for the next 2 years. So I've actually put that in there because right now, if we don't get any more debt, we can still pay for the next 2 or 3 years of the capital improvement plan, but it doesn't mean that I'm not looking at that if we need to, or if it makes sense to do. So we might apply for another loan, but right now we're good for that time period. So we're tracking very well overall to the forecast. That's good. Haven't had to make any major changes, but we are also looking closely at operating expenses this year. We've been hit like everybody with inflation and also supply chain issues. Mike will talk later, but the water treatment plant chemicals is just becoming very hard to find and very expensive if we find them. We were just looking at even wood wedges that we used to block all the wheels. We had a bill, it was $75 and now it's $145. So 50% increase, right, just neck to neck. So we'll continue to watch that closely. So the 5% increase will increase the average residential bill from $128.88, $129 to $135 on average. Most of that is in the base rate. That's this, we're here. These are the increased amounts. It'll be about $75 for every 2 months. It's important to remember this is a 2-month bill. And then based on 6 CCF or 6 cubic feet, 100 cubic feet of water, you'd get a total bill of about $135.33 every 2 months. So that's an increase of $6.45 per billing cycle for 2 months. What that money will be used for, prorated across what you pay for what we're spending in next year. You can see a lot of it is on capital projects. So 48% is on the major capital projects. But if you add in pipe replacement and department capital, we're up to, I think, 73% or 63% of the total bill is just to pay for capital. Operations and maintenance is 27%, and then debt service and taxes and some miscellaneous. So it's not a surprise to us. We've been talking about it for 3 years. We were behind on capital maintenance. We were behind on replacement projects. During that rate study, district staff and the consultants identified the key projects that really needed to be done. The transmission line, we've had 3 breaks up there. It definitely is at its useful life, end of its useful life. And so that's the type of projects that we are targeting and replacing. I think that is all of the presentation other than the budget schedule. Tonight is the budget hearing, and we will take public comments if anyone is here or wants to make comments online. I will also accept them after this by email, and we can incorporate them. The next work session, I just want to point out, is a week from tonight, and it's the only one that's early. That'll be at 4 p.m. And the reason is we'll be covering the capital improvement plan, engineering and operation department budgets, and that usually is the longest of the work sessions. So we'll start that one earlier. And then we have the regular meeting, but we'll also have some budget discussions from the departments on the 25th. And then November 1st is reserved if we need that for additional discussions or comments. And then we plan on adopting a November 8th meeting, which is a regular scheduled meeting. And now we can take public comments if there's anybody.
All right, so this time the public comments period is now open. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter can come forward, state your name and address, or if you're on Zoom, use the raise your hand function. See anybody raising their hand? So at this time, the public comment period is now closed, and I would open it up if commissioners have any questions.
I don't have any questions. I don't do that into session. But I will say, this is fantastic. And one of the reasons that I think that we're able to go and get these low interest loans and the grants, and I talked to last week, Congressman Larson. It's because everybody in this room and on this whole team is really good at their jobs, and having shovel ready projects and being able to show up really to the point to show, and you know, having a great team means that this stuff is good. And so thank you for getting into that, and I look forward to digging deeper.
You're right. We were very fortunate. The transmission line is the key project and we were in the right place. Mike Benton in engineering is the person that applied for those grants and loans. And we just, I think you're right. They were ready to fund projects. And so it's good timing.
I just had a question about the customer service section that you did.
Yeah.
Said about 8,000 calls about that. Is that like customer service in-house and then out in the field too, to doing the shut-offs and?
Yeah, so that was service orders, the 8,000. We're doing about 900 a month. I'll talk a little bit more about it when we do the customer department budget, but it's incredible how many those are inquiries for leaks, you know, changing out meters, changing out registers, move in, move outs is the largest number of those. So every month we have a large transitionary residential. And so at the end of every month, there's an awful lot of calls. And so that involves a service order by customer service, and then the meter department goes out, does a read, and we change over the meter then to the next tenant. So all of those add up to a lot of
Yeah, that's a lot.
customer contacts.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks.
So if there's no further comments or questions, close the public hearing. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion in a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so at this time, we have Kevin Tate filling in for General Manager Sadu. And you're going to give us the manager's updates.
Yeah, I have a couple items here. We have next week, we have the annual flu shot for wellness kit. October 19th, and through May 10th. That's here in addition to flu shots, we're offering basic wellness checks for employees. Cholesterol screens plus booster shots options, tetanus, Hdpe, and measles, mumps, and rubella. So if you are up to date, Commissioner, welcome to come and get both. So that's on the 19th. And then on the 20th, we have the Great Washington Shakeout at 10:20 in the morning. Washington State is the second highest risk of earthquakes in the US. I don't know if you knew that. To decrease the risk to an earthquake, there'll be rock covering hole. It's a great event to kind of reinforce for our employees, but to experience the earthquake. So that's why it's back down, but coming up next week. And then, of course, Brian mentioned the budget work session. So other than that, that's my manager's report. I believe now Mike is in an operation.
Do we have any rain barrels left?
We do. We have some there in the lobby, but we made up about it.
Yeah. I know.
Rain.
Yeah,
This is the time to put them in.
it is.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is gonna be more of a picture and video tutorial kind of thing of projects we've been going on the last few months. We'll get into more of the budget and the money spending aspects as the budget sessions work on, but this is just kind of a little tour of what's been going on. Probably 30 or 40% of the projects that have been going on out of the O&M, basically stuff that we do here at PUD. There's my base here. I am. There we go. So I've talked a few times before about the lagoon cleaning. I want to make a point on this one. Last year we had the lagoons pumped. And it's about $35,000 to have a contractor come in and pump the what I call the waste out of the lagoon. If you look at the other picture here on the right, that's when the they're stirring it up to haul it away by truck, and it costs us a lot of money to haul it. Because it's just like a 4% liquid, and the diesel prices and trucking prices are very costly. So this last season, this year of 2022, this is that same lagoon on the left that with the cooperation of the treatment plant and maintenance, we dried it out. Basically, we took all the water off of it, quit decanting to it, and let it dry this spring. And it got dry enough where we were able to go in there and scrape up the residual that didn't get pumped out last year. And you can see the cleaning off of the banks on the right and left-hand sides. And really cleaned it up back to like fresh, brand new. The asphalt only goes through a certain portion of the bottom of this thing to scrape it out. And then the sides are kind of a natural clay bottom. It's not like a drying bed, so the moisture never really leaves. So what we decided to do this year is we brought in gravel with our paver and roller and rolled the bottom and basically made almost like a concrete bottom to it. And it'll make it much easier to clean if we can keep going through the cycle of not allowing it to fill up to 3 or 4 feet of material like this has happened in the past. We're going to try and keep them lower and rotate them each year and dry them out and clean them out ourselves and potentially save ourselves some money. That's what we're trying to do anyway. So between the treatment plant and maintenance, they did a great job this year of rehabbing that one, the one basin there. And now recently we've noticed some cracking that's getting worse on the filter bay decks and walls. So we have a consultant we hired about a month ago that came in to assess how bad the damage was, if it's superficial or if it's structural or what's going on. And then we had engineering go up and we shot some survey points on a portion of the filter bays to see if there's any continual settling going on, or if this settling happened over the first few years of when these basins were added on as part of the treatment plant upgrade a few years ago, or it's been more than a few years ago. So we're going to monitor this situation, and we're going to take some core samples out of some of the bad spots. And the process that's going to happen this fall is we're going to take these cracks, and we can see the cursor or not, but most of the cracks are on the top parts of these filter bay walls right here where we expanded the filter bays. And then there's some cracks along the other basins here, the flock basins here and here. And there's a settling point here where the plant was put together and this was expanded, that there's a gap in the wall right here. But there's about 12 or 13 foot of fill material in here because these walls go down a pretty good distance. So at this point, we're not sure if it's a major structural issue or is this just where it's settled and that's where it stopped. But for the winter, we are going to go in and have these cracks mitigated. This is just an expansion joint between 2 large walls, but still it should be basically ground out and filled with like an elastomeric type sealer. So we're going to go ahead and do that this fall, basically winterproof it. Same with all the rest of these cracks. We're going to get them ground out and sealed for the winter, and then monitor the settling and see if anything else is going on. This is the one portion on the right where the flock bases were added on in the last expansion of the treatment plant. And you can see kind of a pie-shaped sag there. So again, we've taken the monument shot and shots around the basins, and we'll watch for settling as time goes on. But we're gonna get everything sealed up for now to keep more water from going in and making any more damage. If you look at the picture on the top left where the knife is, what the engineer that came and did a consultation with us, he feels that maybe the rebar was too close to the surface when those things were poured, and it's probably just cracked that surface area of the walls, and it's not anything majorly structural, but yet we still want to get it ground out and sealed, and the stuff they use will go in there and actually coat the rebar and seal it and keep the corrosion from happening further. But he felt that maybe the rebar was poured too close to the top of the wall. So I'm not real concerned about those, more concerned about the one on the right of the sagging of the flock bases. We've heard a lot about the chlorine scrubber. This is the picture of it as of this morning. Broke ground on the 5th. The electrical and the rebar all got inspected today, and concrete will be poured tomorrow. So we'll have a slab in place. You can kind of see electrical stubbed out over here in the corner. So that's going to progress rather quickly now. We hope once we get the slab in there and get the scrubber on. Gutters. I'm sure you've all noticed the gutters got ripped off last winter in the storm on the treatment plant and some here on the building. We've had a hard time getting any type of response from any gutter replacement companies to come give us any kind of a bid or replacement. We finally got Fisher and Son started up their own roofing portion of their company, and we finally got a bid to replace these. And we've had other companies come up and they kind of look at it and they're like, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. Never heard a thing. The difference between the gutters on these is they're 8-inch gutters, and the gutters are hooked to the flashing that goes up under the roofing. So you have to take the roofing up to replace these gutters properly. So we've gotten a bid to get them replaced, and we have a contracting process, and now they're going to start sourcing materials, and hopefully we'll get these things done, because it's a safety issue, obviously above the doors and the sidewalks like that, with water running off, then potentially freezing on the sidewalk, and besides just the visual appearance. But that's finally in process after numerous attempts to get somebody up there to get them fixed.
Like, this is the PUD, we need to get the water right.
Right? Can't get anybody to show up to do a job, and then when they do, it costs you a fortune. But yeah, they're kind of torn off the front of the lip of the building there, right over the front door. So we're gonna get them done, obviously, all the way around the building. But again, it's a larger process than just like a nail up gutter, because the flashing goes up underneath the roofing. So it's a fairly complex process. Talking about meters, we've had 40 meters tested this year, around 40 of the 2-inch to 8-inch tested, and 10% of those that we tested showed a combined loss of 17%. That's just across those 10%. I should say 10% of those meters showed revenue loss, and the 17% might have been 6% on one, 1% on another. But regardless, we got them all repaired and fixed. So it's a good thing we've been out doing this meter testing program, because that's pretty substantial. One meter wasn't working at all. It just dead right from the factory. It wasn't even turning the turbine. So good that we went through this process and found these things, and we'll be doing it again next year as well. But the ones that were failing have been repaired and put right back in service. So that's a test meter on the left that they use, a calibrated test meter. And on the right-hand side, what has been done over the last several years is put a 2-inch test port on the back side of the meters, which for a long time we didn't have those, but we're ordering now with test ports. And you can see where the hose hooks on the back side. That's how you get the water out and test against the comparative meter. Talked a little bit at Waputa about some of our resilient stuff we've been doing. We've done put the underground wire at the Alger well. Our Alger well is kind of the Alger system is a little bit fragile, just due to the amount of usage on it and its reliance on power and so forth. And the power up Cane Lake Road is really, yeah, iffy. And we had an overhead strike from the poles you can see in the pictures, the top of our pump house, and then just limbs coming down in the wintertime. Our power gets knocked out, communications get knocked out. So we decided it'd be a good move to just trench it and put conduit, put an underground service between the poles and the buildings. We did that this summer. So now our communications and our power are both underground, which should give us a lot better resilience there. And at the same time, we also put a portable generator, not portable, standby generator there with propane. So now anytime the power is out, we will still have communications and power to run the well. And we've done 6 of those now in the last 4 years, probably. We have 2 at Alger, just put in Rockport yesterday, and a few other places out there in the system now that makes us more resilient to outages and keeps people in water. And we're going to continue to do probably 3 or 4 more at all our satellite systems as time goes on. We had our annual reservoir cleaning last month. This is Eagle's Nest at Eaglemont, which is our tallest tank, which they typically can't do a very good job on it because they can't spend very much time on the floor. The diving time is so short because of the amount of water in there. The divers can't spend more than about 15 minutes apiece on the floor. So you got to switch out divers, and it's 120 feet tall. So getting their gear back and forth was difficult, but they managed to do it this year and get us an inspection of that reservoir and I believe 5 others. And what we get back at the end of the diving season, which we do every year, we have all the reservoirs have a diver in once every 5 years. So we get inspections and reports back to basically tell what they've seen. They have an underground video or underwater video, I should say, to kind of point out corrosion spots and flaws in paint or things like that. that is what we look for in the report. So if we get the report back, we look at that, and the next time they come out, we can have them address it and fix it. It's just a continually rotating cycle on all of our reservoirs for the cleaning and inspection process. So yes, the transmission line tie-in was the fourth between the 24 and the 36. It's an 18-inch tie-in that was done at the base of Fox Road, which basically gives us the ability now to shut off the transmission line between the bottom of Fox Road and the treatment plant if anything was to break now, which has been our Achilles heel over the years. That's where it's broken the last few times on the hill. So now if we ever need to, we can shut a valve off and isolate that portion, but for now, we'll still keep both lines running. It was a long day for the crew. We had some parts issues, not fittings. Things weren't lashing up well. They spent 12 hours in that hole working on that job. The distribution department spent probably 16 or 17 hours that day shutting it down and all the way through turning it back on and flushing. It was a large project by all the crew and staff. It was a big day, but this will also prevent us from having to doing another shutdown when we tie in the 36-inch. It'll save shutting down the transmission line and put everybody out of water again. So some of the problems we had with these adapter joints are what transition from concrete cylinder to ductile iron. And they were a little bit out of round. Luckily, we had a few more, but by the time the guys fought these parts and pieces, it cost us a couple hours getting to find out what the problem was. But ultimately swapped out these adapters and got new parts and fittings and restrained flange adapters or barrel sleeves, I should say, and they're able to get it back together. So we had a shutdown from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then I'm not getting the water back on until like almost 10 or 11 because of some of these parts issues. But there's only 9 people that are out of water, so ultimately it wasn't too bad. But we don't like exceeding our shutdown time when we don't have to. But sometimes things just don't work out as well as you hope. So this is basically a flyover Brand was doing while the guys were doing the last bolt up there. You see Brant down there somewhere flying it. So yeah, there's the 18-inch connection here, and then our existing 24-inch transmission line, and then here's the 36-inch transmission line here. But the guys did a great job. It was a long day working with
That's
both
right at
crews.
Fox Road.
Yeah, at the base of Fox Road where the big laydown area was, kind of right at the base of the hill. One of the other projects we did recently was take down the old milk tank as part of the agreement with the city of Anacortes. This is one of the projects we were getting done before the turnover. We haven't had water in this tank for a year, and we thought it was gonna be quite a project. You kind of see it's wrapped with steel rods from top to bottom. Every one of those lines was basically where one of those rods was, and it's just a freestanding tank of wooden staves all put together. And again, just a wooden tank that's no longer in service. To me, it's a liability. We like to get those things, if they're not in use, get them out, get them down. So the crew went out there and took it down. And the wood is beautiful. It's some kind of I'm not sure if it's a white cedar or a red cedar or what it is, but those things are all 15 foot long. And I don't think there's a knot in any of them. All straight. Yeah, pretty incredible unit. But it's just it's all in a heap now. Actually, it's all collected. It's back here in the yard, but that job actually went a lot better and quicker than we thought. It was put in service in the 60s, and looking at the wood that we've taken out of it, I was looking at the end grain on it. The trees they made it out of had to have been a couple hundred years old. The grain is really, really tight. It's pretty impressive looking stuff.
Pardon, Mike.
Yeah.
53.
53?
Total 53.
Okay, there you go. So another project we've talked about before is the replacement of the chemical feed lines with the fusible Hdpe pipe. Kind of see on the picture here where it goes from the back of the flock basins and goes into the basement. Our crew dug down along the easement and then crossed the road and over in front of the second clear well, where there's another vault for the chemical injection points. The guys fused all the Hdpe themselves. It's all laid in the ditch with sand and buckshot and trenched now. Instead of boulders and hard fill like it was before. So this should hopefully be a long-term solution. Also, along with these chemical lines, you can see the two blue lines. It's going to be a couple of sample lines from the pump station up to the treatment plant, because now during the days, the guys have to get in a truck and drive down to the pump station for a raw water and a finished water sample. So they go back and forth and do that a few times a day and per shift. Now those samples will be pumped up to the treatment plant and save all that going back and forth down the road, hopefully. So it fixed a few things. We've talked before about the treatment plant clear well vents. Those are being built as we speak, and hopefully in the next month or two, those will be put on. They look like they're in great shape, but the underside, the screens and stuff are corroded and need to be replaced. So there'll be all new vents put on the clear wells. And we're not going to talk too much about the budget stuff until next week, but one of the budget items coming up this next year is we're going to start putting money in each year for tank repainting, because this is the third clear well. The sides of the tank are pretty good, but the coating failed on the roof of the third clear well. So we got an assessment to do that, and I think it came in at $166,000, which years ago probably would have been about 30,000. So we're hoping things change a little bit between now and the bid process, and maybe prices will get better. Yeah,
No.
yeah. Well, yeah, paint for one, it's hard to get a whole period. We had to go to Bellingham to get paint to work on the trim of the shed out here because you can't even get it next door, and it's difficult to get. So yeah, with the coating failure, it's down to the primer. That's not rust, that's a red primer. So it's not like we're eating through the roof, but still needs to be addressed and recoated. This is what it looks like in some of the vents. If you look down underneath the vent, this is where all the steel beams that support the roof basically come together. It's called a China hat. So this is a supporting pole in the middle with a piece of steel, and all that box iron is on end to the center point below the vent. Well, any steel tank that has gassing off of chlorine is difficult to maintain. And then these areas, I think when the tanks are painted, are either missed or not prepped and done properly. You see this a lot at the vent area. So these are things we keep an eye on, again, through either diving videos or our own self-inspections. You find these things, and it's stuff we just got to start planning for and putting money towards and staying on top of. All these assets we put in the ground for the last 40, 50 years, they're not going away.
Do they grind that out around the top then? And
They'd have to take the thing off and abate it, and either empty the tank or abate it from underneath, and and then repaint it. One new addition we got to the fleet this year, we weren't able to order trucks because they just weren't available during COVID. So we kind of shifted direction, and we've been looking at a remote mower. We've rented them a couple times over the last few years to do the steep backsides of the reservoir, the dams, I should say, and the backside of the clear wells, anywhere where it's dangerous to get either a machine or people. We used to do years ago, people with weed eaters, which is really not a good idea. So this remote mower allows us to mow a 58-degree slope remotely up to 800 feet away, and it'll cut down 2-inch trees. And got a little clip here, kind of shows in action if we can get this thing to work. Pretty handy little machine. It's got a winch on the side. It's got lights on. It's got a camera on it. Basically, the guy has a controller in his hand that has an iPad. You basically watch it like you're flying a drone. And this is the backside of a dam. And it goes pretty quick. And again, like I say, you can go up to 800 feet away, out of line of sight, and still operate it. No, you don't watch the whole thing, I guess, but that's the gist of that. But the guy, like I said, has a remote control and an iPad, so you can run it, put it out of visual. It has adjustable heights. You can cut down really rough terrain or shorter terrain. Again, it's got floodlights on it, a camera. It's really a pretty nice unit. It's mainly a I don't know if you can, from Jay's standpoint, my standpoint, it's a safety and it's a risk mitigator, getting someone to hurt their back. I mean, it's a pretty steep slope up there. It's a steep slope for having people up there doing it by hand and also for machinery. If you get up there on those slopes and you're using either a tracked machine or a rubber tired machine, you're also tearing up the ground, sometimes trying to maintain traction, which then again is not good for erosion and everything else. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around. As Jay and I were talking here at the beginning, we had a car. Somebody borrowed his friend's car without his permission, it sounds like. Came down Bow Hill Road and snapped off the power pole. And the power pole landed on our roof. Took out the power to our pump station that feeds the casino. Transformer leaked down the side of the building. We just paid a bill of $30,000 to repair the roof. Well, they got passed on to their insurance company. And Jay just informed me that the PSE bill to the driver was $184,000 for the pole and the power cleanup and the mitigation of the transformer oil.
Where the new road is there?
Mhm. Yeah, we've had that building hit 3 times. People coming down the hill. One time they came down, they peeled that box right off the front right there, took it right off the front of the building, took the doorknob off. It just barely scraped the door. And one other time they hit the opposing wall over here. It's kind of a bad spot there. So yeah, PSE had to have a Vactor out there and clean up and remediate the soil and all that kind of stuff from the transformer oil. So all that got passed on to the unfortunate driver's insurance. But it did kind of bugger up our roof a little bit. And there again, it took 3 months to get somebody out here with the materials to fix it. And lastly, the trees. Give you the before and afters. What used to be. Was the first row cold decked and ready to go? And kind of the process on how it was, how it took place. Yep.
So I do the whole.
Hold on, screen up. So I can expand it here. Kind of. So anyway, that tree there, and then what else we got here? Goes from the falling to the grinding to the feeding of the industrial sized chipper. 120-yard truck. I'm not sure how many loads they hauled out. I'm thinking, I'm not sure I even counted them. A lot. But pretty impressive process, the way those guys came in and took all that out and feeding whole trees into that thing, just grind them up and away they go. So they hauled the chips, and then once the chips are done, or once the trees are ground up, then it was grind the stumps with a portable grinder that the stumps they couldn't rip out. They ground them in place, and then the ones that they could rip out, they used what's called a parrot beak and ripped them out or tore them out with the pointy part of that and ripped out part of the stumps. So the guys were definitely geared up for that operation. They did a great job, cleaned it up really nice. Pretty impressive project, and there's what we got now today. A little bit windier here now too.
Yeah.
They put something, will they put something on there to stop them from growing back even after that? Because some, poplar trees are.
Yeah.
crazy like that.
Yeah, they ground them down pretty good underneath, but this kind of the property line along here is where a lot of the utilities will go in according to Sam. So that's going to be tore up again anyway for the new building. Is one of the reasons why we went ahead and got this done now as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they do start coming up, we'll be able to remediate it with our mowers or spraying or whatever. That's it till we get to the budget stuff next week for money stuff.
Videos, thank you.
Yeah. But
Thank you, Mike.
Good job.
So. On to new business and. That's an application for water service, charge in lieu of assessment. I believe this was on the voucher system. And Bill Truman is going to present.
Nick. Hello. So I'm here to talk about a type of water service request. We get them occasionally. It's been about 5 years since we had one like this. So it doesn't happen that often, but we've been working with this customer for a couple years. It's related to the Alger water system, and they would like to have water. Their well is failing. It's for an existing house. It's not new development. It's existing property, existing house, and they've been requesting service. So there were two things we had to address. One was the water service area, and we addressed that in our recently approved water system plan, where we had to expand our service area outside of where the existing water system was to be able to serve this property. And the other part was that water system was built through the LUD process in 2000. And this property was not included in the LUD. It was not assessed by the LUD. And so we need to determine an assessment, a fee in lieu of assessment for this property to be able to be served by the water system. So the memo has quite a bit of information. The summary is in 2000, when that LUD was constructed, a portion of it was contributed by the district and system development fees, developer contributions, and a grant also. And then the balance was paid by all the properties was spread across it. So there is capacity enough for this service. And so that's where it is rests is for that fee. And our policy has a process for determining the fee in lieu, and we worked with the finance department to calculate that fee. So the main two parts to the fee are, the first one would be a similar assessment to what that property would have been assessed at the time of the LUD. And on page 2 of the memo, it shows that at that time, the similar sized properties were around $6,000 for the fee, the assessment. And then per WAC and RCWs, there's interest applied for every year. And it ranged, it's inflation assessment, and ranged from between 0 and 4.5%. So the interest was almost $3,000. So the final fee in lieu of assessment that we calculated is $89.66, and that's the main. That is the purpose of this request, is to have that approved. This property also does not front the water line. It's very close, but there's another property between it and the water line, and we have proposed it to the general manager, and he approves of our recommendation that we consider this lot what is called a limited access lot. And in other words, they're allowed to set the meter at the water line and bring their service line across the other property to serve their house. But if they further develop that property at some time in the future, want to subdivide it, a short plat, it would be reassessed, and we may require a new water line to go into that area. So this is a one-time approval for this single service. And that's the nuts and bolts to it.
So that criteria was already approved by the homeowner?
The limited access lot determination, that's what we do in-house at the general manager's level. The starting point is, if you don't front a water line, you need to build a water line to your property. But for example, in this case, it's one service. It's not warranted to have a full-size PUD water line travel to nowhere, basically, because there's no growth anticipated yet. So we analyze that and determine that it doesn't need to happen for this situation. But if it changes, they'll have to come to us again if they request more services in that area.
We would be looking here for a motion to establish charge and assessment on parcel 47572. in the amount of $8,966 to obtain domestic water service from the district's out of water system, which was constructed between the Lake Sanish Road Local Utility District number 24.
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
So. So. Like, other than that, we have the information there.
I guess I forgot to add. I was gonna say during the presentation that there might be a couple of things that adjust in the budget between now and next week, because we just had a hoist at at the water treatment plant that's been broken and has been repaired, but we need to put it in the budget to replace it for next year. So it wasn't today's numbers. But it'll probably be in next week's numbers. I was told Brian I'd put it in there. Not huge, but it might be a little difference in the price between last week and next week. And maybe the vehicles when I hear from that guy too.
Okay, so we've got the Judy Reservoir data report, any commissioner comments this evening?
We don't have it.
None from me either. So at this time, we will adjourn at 5:35 p.m.